For the Chicago Bears to reach their full potential this season, they'll need their more injury-prone players to hold up more consistently this year. And we're learning more about what some of these players are doing to take better care of their bodies.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On the show today, we'll check in with some of the Bears players who have been injured in recent seasons, who are trying to really kick that injury bug and stay healthy for a full 2024 season, or at least more of the 2024 season than we've seen them on the field the last couple of seasons. We'll start with DeMarcus Walker, the defensive lineman who stayed out there for almost every game last season, but turns out he was a lot more injured than we thought during the season, and we certainly remember him being injured and missing a lot of time during training camp last year. So we'll find out more about what he's doing and what he's learned from last season and why that could bode well for more of a bounce back 2024. Then we'll hear from guard Teven Jenkins, who has a known history here of not being able to finish out these seasons. And every year we hear about different things he's doing with his body, but he feels like this year he's really putting much more of a tangible investment into it that he hopes pays off in the long term. And then we'll wrap up hearing from offensive coordinator Shane Waldron about how, injuries or not, they need to have this offensive line prepared for those possibilities. And it helps explain some of how they're approaching moving different guys around throughout the offseason and then building continuity on the offensive line a little bit later in the process. But I want to start with DeMarcus Walker because he was a guy who certainly got off on the wrong foot last year at training camp with some injuries and was missing practice quite a bit in those early phases. Of course, then they ended up going out and bringing in Unique Ngakoue, so we kind of forgot about it at that point. Ended up being supposedly healthy for week one, but as he kind of revealed this week, he was not as healthy as you would have thought starting the regular season. And in kind of a counterintuitive way, he ended up kind of getting healthier later on in the season as the year went on, and it contributed to what ended up being a stronger finish to 2023 than the start that he had. Here's how he explained his process and his journey there.
Last year, you missed a lot of the training camp because of injury, and it kind of took you a while to ramp up. How much better does this feel coming into this camp, assuming you're healthy?
Yeah, man. Last year was definitely a learning lesson. To not overwork during the off season, but just be, prepared and trust what you got, going on. And, that was more, an eye-opening thing for me last year to come into in this camp fully healthy. And also knowing what, the practice load that Fluke's going to take us through, too. So, I know what to expect now.
You said it's eye-opening. How much did that hurt you last year? Like, even just your regular season?
I mean, y'all wasn't so nice to me, you know what I'm saying? So, it was definitely something that to where I had to just take, the punches and roll with it to, understand that to where you got to just continue taking it one day at a time and continue growing and continue getting better. The first 11 weeks was definitely, humbling. I feel like I was about 75% healthy, and then to where I was able to, take care of my body, get some, special treatment, acupuncture and all that stuff. And then I was able to get more balanced and then able to have my feet underneath me.
It certainly explains some of the struggles that Walker had last season, given that he wasn't operating at 100%. But I like the reflection and the self-awareness there to kind of learn from that and recognize that, hey, wait a minute, maybe I didn't know exactly what I was getting into here, or maybe I just didn't handle it the way that I should have or, wanted to, or however you want to word it for him, like one way or another. This was his first time, coming to Chicago and trying to get to know what this team was going to expect of him, what Matt Eberflus practices were going to be. The hits principle is certainly a level of intensity and hustle at practice that maybe is higher than some of what Walker had been used to in the past, and maybe that pushed him in some different ways. I think it's easy to look at what he did last season and think the Montez Sweat bump is what makes all the difference. And it certainly was a noticeable difference for DeMarcus Walker. But, throughout this offseason, people have pointed out over the last 3 games of 2023, he had 2 total sacks, but hit the quarterback in 3 games with a half sack against the Browns, a half sack against the Falcons, and then a full sack against the Green Bay Packers in Week 17. And that, to me, can be a combination of getting more comfortable being on this team, by the end of the season, really understanding his role and his assignment and how the defense operates. It's also the Montez Sweat bump and having Sweat on the other side, but also just being healthier later down the stretch after getting some of those different types of treatments that he talked about. And I mean, acupuncture was not one of the answers I thought I would expect to hear from him in that part, but certainly, like you said, some humbling there that it really kind of has him fully healthy and locked in and dialed, and I think approaching this season from a much better position health and body-wise than what we saw from him last year. And maybe that's some of what gives Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus confidence in what their defensive line can produce here, and as opposed to hurrying out to sign someone like Yannick Ngakoue earlier in this process. But to say, well, we didn't get to see a lot of healthy DeMarcus Walker last season. They did turn it on at the end of the year, so we'll roll with that. We didn't get to see Montez Sweat be a part of this team for the whole process, so we still need to see that. And, you added Jacob Martin, you drafted Austin Booker, and it contributes to this idea of maybe they can piece this pass rush and defensive line together with the guys that they already have under contract, expecting them to continue to get better, both in terms of regular player development and in DeMarcus Walker's case, just being able to be healthier and better as a result of not having those lingering injuries. Because I don't think he technically missed a game on the game log. I think he missed snaps in some games, but not didn't completely miss full games last season. But to have him be at 100% can really go a long way, especially as we talked about on yesterday's podcast, that they're going to be asking him to kick inside more to defensive tackle and be more of an interior pass rusher at times. We went through how they're going to do that with Montez Sweat and maybe Dominique Robinson as well on the podcast with some quotes from them. So go back and take a listen to that one if you have not already, because the versatility could be what ends up being key to this defensive line and could be what keeps them from signing a veteran like Ngakoue still, even though, last year it wasn't until early August that they signed him. So there's still time for the Bears to make that decision again, and not, it's not going to be too late at this point. But as long as Walker stays healthy and Sweat stays healthy and Booker and Robinson and Jacob Martin and even Khalid Kareem, they do have numbers and depth on this defensive line. There's just not a lot of overall proven pass rushing production, but there is still talent here. And I think Walker being healthy adds a lot more to that talent than Walker at 75%. We kind of saw what the difference looked like over the course of last season. Clearly, we saw the difference in what the offensive line on the other side looks like when healthy versus not healthy. And unfortunately, Braxton Jones missed some time. Nate Davis missed some time. Lucas Patrick missed some time. Cody Whitehair missed some time. I think Darnell Wright was really the only one who was a full Iron Man type player for this offensive line last year. But a lot of the health of this line is going to pivot on Teven Jenkins, who hasn't played a full 17-game season in his young NFL career, but he's literally invested a lot more into his body this offseason to make sure that he can stay healthy as he enters a contract year, which, by the way, negotiations not happening right now. We'll take a look at Jenkins' situation, both from a health and body standpoint and a future contract negotiation standpoint, next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. I use Gametime all the time for all the concerts I go to, for sports games, for comedy shows, theater events, you name it. They've got it all on Gametime. Just last week, I went to Wrigley Field to see Def Leppard, Journey, and Steve Miller Band. It was a great show. Wrigley is such a great venue for a concert. And it was great because I knew exactly what my view was going to look like in the Gametime app. I could see my view from my seat, so I knew exactly what I was paying for. And I knew exactly how much I was going to pay before I got to checkout, because the Gametime has all-in pricing, so there aren't any added fees that get tacked on at the end that make your tickets cost way more than you thought you were. Then you maybe go back and change tickets, and it just becomes a whole hassle. Not on Gametime. So that's why we always like to say you take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This Bears offensive line has injury concerns at a couple of positions, mainly the 2 guard spots where Nate Davis has had some inconsistent availability over the last, 14 months or however long, go back to free agency, so like 15, 16 months, the last year and change that he's been with the team. And then Teven Jenkins has had that issue his entire career. And with all these guys, I hope it's obvious that like in suffering injuries is not like their fault. It's not anything they're doing on purpose or, obviously they all would do whatever they can, try and do whatever they can to prevent it. But like Teven Jenkins is a rookie, played 6 games. His second year, he played 13 games. Last year, he was on the field for 12. Like those are 2/3 of a season he's playing most of the time. At best, 2/3 of the season, missing a good third of the year every year. And as the Bears try and weigh how much to pay him on a next contract and how much to invest in him as a potential cornerstone offensive lineman for Caleb Williams, his availability is going to go a long way in determining that. And Jenkins is no idiot, is not oblivious to that, recognizes that, hey, like, yes, this has been a consistent issue for him. It's not something he wants to be, doesn't want to be sitting out games. Like he wants to be out there playing and getting better. And when we have seen him on the field, he's been really, really solid and continues to improve and dominate at times as a guard in this league. So for him, it's an opportunity to take a step back and say, all right, like contract year, I've got to really dig in and make sure I'm doing absolutely everything I can with my body now so that I can try and cash in on this upcoming contract and then really be set on whatever money that's going to bring beyond, with just the initial investment in the body right now.
Teven, at this point of your career, do you have any different game plan or approach into the season to make sure that A, this is your best season, and B, that you're available all season?
Other than spending a lot more money on my body than I ever have, that's really about it. Because I'm just like starting to hammer more. Like I'm gonna talk to my PT guy. I'm gonna see if he comes out twice a week. Make sure I get my body going into the game day. I'm trying new chefs out and making sure we can make sure I keep my inflammation down in my body. Make sure nothing's bumping bruises. I'm start looking into more massage. I'm not a big massage guy, but I'm gonna look into probably seeing if that would be beneficial as well.
Are you off to a good start? Is this the best you felt at this time, at this point in training camp since you've been here?
Yeah, it has.
What spurred this investment back into your body, into your nutrition and everything? Like what was the genesis for that for you?
Genesis mean?
Like what was the beginning? What made you decide I want to do this?
I would say just basically the future of what I want. And, I made it vocal many times that I want to be here on the Chicago Bears and whatever I need to do of how much I need to pay forward to get it back in the back end. And that's the determination I have to keep doing that and understanding that I need to spend more short term to get more long term for myself and my family.
I'll admit, like I think it's a good approach by Teven Jenkins. I think it's important that he is investing as much as he can in his body for his health and for trying to be as effective of a guard as he can for the Chicago Bears. And I want Teven Jenkins to be successful and I'm rooting for him, but like I'm not necessarily convinced that like this is going to be the solution here or this is exactly what's going to solve the injury problems because you can try and control everything you possibly can with every ounce of food and liquid that enters your body and sleep. Like you can control every single aspect. And in the game of football, you're crashing into defensive linemen every single play, and injuries happen to everybody. And even if your body is in the best peak perfect condition, you can't stop another lineman from rolling up on your leg or a running back from coming up behind. I mean, anything like that can not be a reflection of you not taking good enough care of your body. It's just the random chance and luck of football. And I do feel like as well, like we've been through this type of Teven Jenkins narrative. Last year, the big thing was like he started doing Pilates. That was kind of the notable like headline. It's like, oh, Teven Jenkins doing Pilates to keep his body a little bit looser. He felt like he was a little bit too tight, and that was what was contributing to maybe the durability questions there or his injury risk and stuff. So that was kind of supposed to be the solution, and of course, didn't really work. And so it becomes a little bit of the lineman who cried wolf here is like, okay, like now we're trying this, and this is going to be what solved the body. And he's not claiming like, oh yes, I have perfected injuries and will never be hurt again. So I'm not, it's not meant to be like a criticism of him not doing enough. It's just more so, this is really hard to prevent. And I feel for Teven Jenkins, and I hope he is successful with it. But I don't leave that press conference audio thinking, all right, great. Got 17 games with Teven Jenkins locked in, no questions, no doubt. Like, no, still have all of the doubt, but glad to hear that he obviously takes it very seriously. It's very important to him, as it should be, and that he's taking even more steps to try and correct it. It's certainly going to be a major factor in how the Bears negotiate that contract with him, which they're not currently negotiating, though. Teven Jenkins also in that press conference later was asked, where does that stand? And he said, he said before he wants to be a Chicago Bear for a long time, but currently he said the team said they'll start negotiating, like, wait until the bye week, and then we'll circle back around to it, is essentially what he was told. The Bears have a bye week in week 7, I believe. So, you'll have about 6 games on your belt. I can get the idea of, okay, we want to see you be healthy before we give you a long-term contract extension. But 6 games is not necessarily proof that he's going to be healthy for the full season. So I'm not sure exactly. I mean, the bye week is probably just like a convenient time to give him and say, all right, we'll check back in then, as opposed to, we'll make a decision then, is 2 different things. I mean, he did start last season on injured reserve. So, like, even just getting through week 6 unscathed would be, a good start. But, like, a couple of seasons ago, like 2022, his injuries were pretty much all at the end of that year. So the first 6 games weren't necessarily an indication of, his health or his durability over the course of that season. So I don't expect the Bears to get to the bye week and say, all right, it's been 6 weeks of healthy, here's your $20 million a year contract or whatever. Like, I don't think it'll be quite that, but I think, okay, week 6, they start negotiating again and say, let's check in on where you're thinking your value is, where we're thinking our value is. But I'm not expecting the Bears and Teven Jenkins to agree to any kind of long-term contract extension before the end of the regular season. I could see them, if they get through a pretty darn healthy 18-week season here, like say he plays 15 games. I don't think he has to play 17 to get a deal, but say he plays 15 games, misses only 2 games at most, then I think the Bears might get through this and say, all right, we'll give you an extension and try and put some kind of protection for the team in there, with, structure the guaranteed money in a way that gives them some safety if there is future injury issues. But, like, I just don't see them being fully confident in his durability, because that's really the main question here, right? I don't think anyone's sitting here going, well, we still need to see if Jenkins is a good player or not. Like, we all, I think, have a pretty good sense of, like, he's good. You'd love to have him around for the next 5 years if you knew he was going to be able to be on the field for full seasons. Like, the only question is that durability, and 6 weeks is not enough time to really determine that. So I think they'll go through the full regular season, and if he stays healthy, they'll get a long-term deal done well before free agency. If he doesn't stay healthy again, that's a real interesting question going into the offseason. What that looks like if they let him test free agency, if anyone's willing to pay him. I mean, that will be a fascinating conversation, but that's still steps ahead. Let's all hope for Teven Jenkins having good health here, and for good health across the offensive line. That being said, the Bears are preparing for the possibility and the likelihood that at least somebody on the offensive line is going to be injured and is going to miss games, and that backups are going to need to be out there. And I thought Shane Waldron had a really good answer for what I usually am concerned about when it comes to not leaving enough time for the offensive line to develop continuity. So we'll look at some of the intentionality behind, hey, maybe we don't need to have all the starters playing all the reps all locked into one spot right now so early, because there's some added value to getting other players involved at this point. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. This Bears offensive line has 4 established starters at both tackle spots and both guard spots with an open competition at center. And I've said a few times throughout this process that, you would have preferred the Bears get one true established center, that there's no competition and no question there. So Caleb could be working with the same center throughout OTAs, minicamp, and training camp in the preseason into the regular season, not switching, cadences, not switching snapping dynamics. I think one of them is left-handed, one of them is right-handed, the 2 centers the Bears have. Like, there's just, little things like that are going to be different with Coleman Shelton and Ryan Bates rotating back and forth in that competition. And the Bears have this history of long before offensive line coach Chris Morgan, but dating back now a decade plus, of Bears offensive line coaches for some reason being very inclined to move guys around a lot in the preseason and training camp and even late before the regular season. Like, I'll never forget Kyle Long in, I don't remember what year that was now, 2015 maybe, or 2014, where he was playing guard through the first 2 or 3 preseason games, and then they moved him to right tackle right before the start of the regular season and said, surprise, you're playing a new position that you haven't played. And it's just it's infuriating that they haven't always been smart enough to think ahead and see through some of these things and know where they want guys until the last possible minute. And then those guys don't have a lot of time to learn the new stuff. So when you have Karan Amagaji eventually supposed to get healthy and come off the non-football injury list, is he going to be playing multiple spots? Are they going to be moving, different guards around back and forth? Is Larry Borum going to be at left tackle and then right tackle? Or, he was filling in for Braxton Jones when he was missing practice. There ends up being a lot of different moving parts on the offensive line. And I've long had this stance of why do you keep moving guys around so much? Just get the starting 5 out there so you can build that continuity and cohesion, because it's so important for offensive linemen to learn all the little nuances of the guy next to him. But I thought the Bears offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, did a good job of pushing back on that idea in ways that I think are really valid, and making the case that hey, yes, continuity and cohesion is definitely important and something that you want to establish early and try and build out. But in the meantime, there's a lot of value in having these guys practice together in different combinations, whether that's, the quarterback getting to know different combinations or the linemen next to each other getting to know those different combinations, because over the course of the regular season, you're most likely going to have to try out different offensive line combinations. Here's how Waldron addressed the timeline.
I know it's early on here, but as you look at the offensive line in particular, when do you want to shift from kind of the idea of competition to continuity and what that can be for a young quarterback? When is it important to have that transition really take place?
Yeah, I think in my mind, the competition's always going. So been places where we were fortunate enough to have depth at offensive line in the past, where you see that stuff result in wins in the future. So I think there is a continuity aspect, but I think as the guys, we'll hone in on certain specific positions where guys might not be moving around as much, as we get into camp. But in terms of, the different guys that, a 2 deep at the offensive line that can work with the ones, I think it's paramount to have that, just like it is with every position. So, when the time is right in terms of, guys have established the starting role at each spot, and there's different levels to that at each position, we'll make those judgments. But I think there's a human element always to the competitions, and understanding when that right time isn't going to be the same for every single competition or every single player. And the more guys that play, the better our depth is as the season goes.
So as much as it would be ideal to be able to declare tomorrow that, hey, here's your 5 starting offensive linemen, they're going to play every first team rep together and build as much continuity and cohesion as possible over the next month and change before week 1, so that Caleb can go into week 1 with the same 5 offensive linemen that they've worked with all along and everyone's locked in. Yes, that is ideal here. But again, it's not realistic that all 5 offensive linemen are going to be that same combination from week 1 through week 18. And so there is some real value in Caleb getting to know 2 different centers. Sure, you hope and plan on Ryan Bates or Coleman Shelton, whoever wins the starting center competition, you plan on them being the center all year. But injuries, like we just talked about with Teven Jenkins, especially on the offensive and defensive line, there's so much contact and so much that's out of their control. Injuries happen on offensive lines across the board, and not a ton of offensive linemen play every snap every season. And so if you're just playing the odds here, it's likely even that Ryan Bates or the Coleman Shelton, the winner of the center competition, will miss at least 1 snap next season. Doesn't have to be multiple games, but they will miss at least a play over the course of next season. And so it's beneficial for Caleb Williams to have some experience taking snaps from the backup center, whoever wins and whoever loses that competition. Like there's a real value that are being going, even if it's early in training camp and that's the only reps they end up getting together, that's still more than 0 reps if you had to bring that backup in the middle of a week 14 game against whatever team you're playing in week 14. It's probably an NFC North game, like the Lions or whatever. Like if you have to bring in that center and Caleb has never taken snaps from him because he's been the backup the whole time and only Tyson Bagent has taken snaps from this backup center, like we can't quantify exactly what that value looks like, but there's something there to be said about those guys having worked together. Or same thing with the other guys on the line, like getting Larry Borum in at left tackle and at practice when Braxton Jones has a real minor thing. Like there's a chance, just like last season, that Braxton Jones could get hurt and miss a couple games. And it would be nice for Jenkins and Larry Borum to have some experience being next to each other on the left side in case that happens. Even if it's just a few training camp practices, like that still, it gives them some level of a foundation that's more than 0 if you end up having to make those changes during the regular season due to injuries and things that are out of your control, let alone benching the center for being, not good enough or something like that. But just given the injury history of both of your guards and your left tackle last season, like having these different opportunities, even earlier in OTAs and minicamp when Nate Davis is not out there, you had Ryan Bates filling in at right guard. You had Matt Pryor filling in at right guard. I think Jatari Carter got some guard time as well. Like having those guys get those experiences so they know then what it's like to play next to Coleman Shelton at center, know what it's like to play next to Darnell Wright at right tackle. Like it's not a lot. It's not going to make or break specifically their success or failure as a backup lineman filling in, but any of that experience can help make that transition easier so they're not completely thrown into the fire brand new and trying to figure out, okay, how does this guy block next to me? How does Caleb Williams call certain things? Like they're not only having just heard Tyson Bagent and the backups throughout their entire practice time with the Chicago Bears. So I concede to Shane Waldron that yes, like there is some real value to there, but I think even he in there says yeah, we want to get these guys established fairly soon and build that continuity and cohesion. Like cohesion and continuity is still what's important and still probably what's most important, but we can acknowledge the value in getting different guys, different reps at different spots early on in this process, then settling everybody in and then dialing in for the regular season. And, you'll still have a good month of time of preseason games and training camp practices before week 1. And then over the course of the regular season, getting guys ramped up and ready to go. So we'll be keeping some close tabs on how the Bears center competition goes and if there's any other movement along this offensive line, particularly among the depth players there. Whenever Karan Amagashi comes off the non-football injury list as well, we'll break it all down for you right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen, now that we're wrapping up Locked On Bears, go check out one of our other Locked On Podcast Network podcasts. We've got all of your major sports covered, including college sports as well, for all of your favorite teams across the country. So whether they're Chicago-based or not, go check out another Locked On podcast to keep your day rolling. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.